But as you know, we provided a little bit of a presentation of disruption in sales tax to the board of directors at our last meeting. There were a lot of questions. We followed up with a little summary on how sales tax works, and we wanted to invite the expert to come and really give you a good overview and allow you to ask questions and get all of your questions answered. I've worked with Doug. This is Doug Jensen from MuniServices. He's Vice President of Client Services. I worked with Doug for many years. My prior life, I was a city finance director, and so we did an awful lot with sales tax. And so I wanted to invite Doug to come and give you a presentation and walk you through and hopefully answer all of the questions that you have. So
great.
I'll leave that over to Doug.
Thank you, Roberta. It's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon. What I'd like to start off with is kind of an overview of the question that I get a lot from is, why is sales tax not keeping up with the economy? California has one of the strongest economies in the country. In 2016, California's gross domestic product, which is the value of all goods and services manufactured and produced and consumed in California, grew 4.5%, but sales tax only grew 2.3% during that same period of time. You may have finance directors and budget directors in your jurisdictions bringing a budget to you with sales tax growth looking fairly anemic when you look around and the economy looks really strong. This chart is actually based upon the city of Sacramento. The blue line is the city of Sacramento's actual sales tax revenue. The gray line is their sales tax revenue as a percentage of California gross domestic product. And just about every jurisdiction in California, this X is forming. And it started around 2003, and this goes back all the way to 1994. By the way, the blue line is not adjusted for inflation. If you adjust for inflation, it's fairly flat. So why is sales tax not growing as much as the economy? There's four major themes I'm going to cover today. One is just generally speaking about our sales tax rule. It was written in 1933. It's the year we built the Golden Gate Bridge. So it was a long time ago. Only changes, substantive changes to it was to add hundreds of pages of exemptions. The internet didn't exist in 1933. And then, by the way, in 1955, Bradley Burns was a bill that created this 1% uniform statewide local sales and use tax rate. So that's your general fund sales tax rate is 1%. Internet sales didn't exist then. Business-to-business sales online. You think about internet retail sales taking sales tax away from your municipalities. There's an awful lot of businesses buying online. Staples.com is one of the biggest sales tax generators in the state. And there's a large pool of uncollected sales tax revenues, and I'll get into the reasons why and some potential solutions. And then the generational cohorts. As the baby boomers get older, they're buying less goods and more services. Our economy is shifting from a goods economy to a service economy. So things were a lot different in 1933, a lot different in 1955. And then the fourth major issue is exemptions. Exemptions cost local government $3.2 billion annually, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. First, I wanted to show you an overview of the Sacramento Valley sales tax results for the latest quarter. And you can see general retail statewide, pretty anemic, 0.8% growth, 1.9% in the Valley. Dropping down to that restaurant category, largest segment, my joke is, the restaurants are doing well because you can't buy a good meal online, yet, right? That's coming with the Amazon acquisition of Whole Foods. Building material wholesale, that's the construction sector. So Sacramento Valley was a little late in the recovery. Some moratoriums on building kind of held off some of the construction pent-up demand. You can see it's already contracting statewide, down 3.4%. That's the sales tax that's generated on new construction. And then you can see department stores statewide down 0.8%. That's shifting to internet sales. And then department stores in the Valley actually doing fairly well as a whole, up 1.4%. I'm not going to go into any more of the details. If you want to ask questions, I can cover the reasons behind those trends. Another one is another look at sales taxes by per capita. So we took 2008. This is actually City of Sacramento. Theirs looks a little bit more robust than other cities. A lot of cities, that trend is fairly flat. But if you look at the general retail portion, it was $36 in 2008 per capita, and it's $36, 9 years later. And these are unadjusted for inflation. So basically, people are spending a little less really on retail. And then food products, that's where we classify restaurants and supermarkets. We've seen some growth there. We've seen a little bit of growth in transportation, good growth in construction, and it took from 2008 to 2016 to get back to where we were in 2008 prior to the last recession. So internet sales. This is also based upon the city of Sacramento. And the blue line up top is their total sales tax revenue. The green line is their sales tax revenue from general retail. Department stores, apparel stores, shoe stores, jewelry stores, bookstores, all of that type of just general retail based. And that gray line is the percentage of online retail sales as a percentage of all retail sales. And in 1999, it was only 0.6%. In 2016, it went to 8.5%. There's another data source that says it's 10.2%. And a third data source that we found, December of 2016, was 21.6%. So the bulk of holiday, almost a quarter of holiday sales were done online. Why is this a big deal? Because if you're a business that does not have nexus in California, you don't have to collect California sales tax. And there's $23 billion annually, nationally, of uncollected sales tax revenues. Now, it's not a tax-free transaction. You, as a consumer or as a business, when you're buying from out of state, there's a use tax on that. You're supposed to report use tax on your state income tax return, and I'm not going to ask for a show of hands of who does that. The latest number we saw was only 0.2% of state income taxes have a number on that line.
That's everybody in this room.
Fair enough, sir. Sir.
When the legislature passed the sales tax measure that involved Amazon, didn't they mean to keep 100% of the money for themselves? If so, we're able to share in return.
No, so the Amazon bill in September of 2012 was a bill that was basically trying to get internet sales. So Amazon technically had physical presence in California, but it was operated by third-party companies. So technically Amazon didn't own anything in California. It was done through these third-party affiliates. And the state was going to go after them for collection. So in September of 12, they started collecting sales tax. Your local general fund sales tax is collected by Amazon and distributed to the county pool of destination. So everybody in your county that shops from Amazon, and if Amazon collects the sales taxes, they're only collecting the sales tax on the orders that they fulfill, not their out-of-state affiliates. So there's still quite a bit of uncollected sales taxes there. So your county pool revenue is distributed to every jurisdiction in your county based upon proportion of total sales tax. Any other questions on this slide? So this is a combination of some of the storefronts in Sacramento Valley. The storefront for Macy's for the latest year actually grew 2.5%, but their .com business grew 28.7%. Nordstrom contracted 4.9% in the Valley, and their online was up 17%. Target storefront up 4%, .com 27.7%. So when we went from 0.6% of internet retail sales to 8.2%, these are the numbers we're still seeing. So that number is going to continue to go up and to the right. Some of the other big boxes that I didn't have the heart to put on here was Sears. It's well documented in the press that Sears is probably going to go out of business by this year. JCPenney's was down a little bit, flat in some areas. Kohl's department stores down about 5% on average year over year. And this little box at the bottom, I mentioned $23 billion of uncollected sales taxes. That amounts to $23.4 million of lost sales tax to uncollected in Sacramento Valley in the 5-county region. And then there's 2 federal bills. So back to your question about the Amazon bill. This Marketplace Fairness Act and this Tax Parity Act are bipartisan supported bills in Congress that would allow states to compel all online internet retailers with $1 million more of sales to start collecting California sales tax. That is, I think it's a leveling the playing field for brick and mortar, and these bills have been introduced for the last few sessions. There's been other things on Congress's mind, like health care. But recently, the Treasury Secretary came out and said that that the administration would support if these get through Congress. So the Marketplace Fairness is the Senate version of the bill, and the Tax Parity Act is the House bill. And basically, I don't want to get too deep into the woods, but if you heard of the Quill decision, this was a 1993 Supreme Court decision that upheld the Interstate Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution, saying that if there's no physical presence in a state, let's say there's no physical presence of an internet retailer in California, California cannot regulate that business. They're not in our state because they don't have physical presence. Well, how old of a notion is physical presence when you have internet, right, and same-day delivery? So those are, I think, very important bills to level the playing field and pick up $23 million more dollars in sales tax revenue. The third portion is this taxable versus non-taxable. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes an annual spending survey, and we took that survey and put it into what's taxable in California and what's non-taxable. So the gray and black section at the top of the chart is what's currently being spent that's subject to California sales tax. Then there's a, 2/3 is uncollected. Now, I'm not advocating taxing necessities of life, right? Food, medical, housing, education. Those should stay untaxable. The tax reform discussions going on around the country, and in particular across the street, is to push the needle a little bit further and look at services, look at personal services, professional services. Many other states tax professional services. There's been some bills that have been introduced in Sacramento to do that. The problem is they don't lower the rate. I think the long-term solution to a declining revenue source is to lower the rate and broaden the base. So you make it revenue neutral, and then all your communities can do more with what you have. So if you don't have an auto mall, but you have a lot of accountants and lawyers and architects and lawn service and barbershops and nail salons, you're going to start getting revenue from those and have less pressure on the fiscalization of land use and developing land that's particular just going to generate sales tax. So it'd give us a broader development aspect. So right now of spending, we're taxing 33%. If you move that needle to the green section, we'd be about 50%. So you'd almost cut the rate in half. Our estimates are you could lower the statewide rate from 7.25% to around 4.25% and be revenue neutral. That would also give us the lowest sales tax rate in the western region and make California even more competitive. The structural frailties of exemptions. Again, there were 3 exemptions that were on the records in 1933. Now there's hundreds of pages. Cost local government $3.2 billion annually. I took an estimate of Sacramento Valley is 6.3% of statewide sales tax. I took California's whole sales tax population. It's a $200 million cost to the cities and counties in Sacramento Valley. And I'm not advocating whether one exemption is good or bad. The thing about the exemptions is they get put into our tax laws and they're never looked at again. Does exempting oak wine barrels still serve a public policy? I don't know. Nobody's talking about it. And really we're looking at not necessities of life in general or general public, should we tax nonprofits or museums? I mean, that's left up to the policymakers. But this industry benefit and exclusions by definition, those are areas that in discussions of tax reform, maybe you have the legislative analyst office every 5 years do a review of these exemptions. Which ones still make sense, which ones don't. In particular, digital goods. So the Board of Equalization in 1995 changed the definition of downloaded software, which also applies to downloaded music, streaming video. Everything's streaming now. Killed the record store, obviously. It's killing fries, killed off good guys in Circuit City. They just changed the definition that anything that's downloaded electronically is intangible and therefore not taxable. So some of those just definitions could be reviewed as part of an overall tax reform. And if you can't sleep tonight, read Publication 61. So in closing, there's a couple tale of 2 cities. So in Houston, in Texas, they tax telecommunications, they tax services. they don't tax gasoline, of course. This is the two largest cities, one in Texas, one in Los Angeles. You can see that by and large, the city of Houston actually performs better. Tale of two capitals. The gray line is Austin, Texas, and you can see Sacramento, the other capital, trailing far behind in terms of a broader growth pattern. I would think that the line in Austin, if you line that up with Texas's gross domestic product, it'd probably be a lot closer. And then in general, some of the trends. So general retail, obviously online sales are slowly siphoning away more and more sales tax every year. There's a changing landscape in retail. It's more about the experience. Places like Topgolf, puzzle rooms, the entertainment value. That's where a lot of the shopping malls are going. By and large, in the United States, we overbuilt retail over the last 30 years. There's 1,200 super regional malls in the United States. In 5 years, it's expected to be 900, replaced by something, probably high-density residential or mixed-use developments. It is what it is. It's just a changing land use discussion. Food products, restaurants continue to be the social gathering hub of today's society. It used to be the mall. Now it's the restaurant. And it's tied into, the experience. How many likes do you get on your Instagram account with your selfie of your dinner plate? And the question is, will Amazon and Whole Foods put pressure on the restaurant industry? You could technically order that nice hot meal prepared and have it delivered to your door in an hour. So supermarkets are at risk, and I think restaurants need to really think about their future. Transportation, we're basically a supply and demand on auto sales. I don't know where all of your jurisdictions, but auto sales is a big sales tax generator, and we're looking at 2.5% to 5% growth over the next few years. The big run-up of growth in sales tax is behind us from the pent-up demand from the recession. I mentioned earlier, Sacramento Valley kind of lagged the state in the construction recovery. So there's plenty of construction projects in the pipeline through 2019. So we're pretty optimistic on sales tax there. And then business to business, this whole cloud computing has dramatically reduced the need for network systems. So there's companies in the valley like HP that just aren't selling as many networks because they're all consolidated into the cloud. And then the advancement of software that's replacing hardware. Phones really don't have to exist anymore. It can all be done right through your computer, through voice over internet. So that's it. I'm open for questions.
You mentioned out of sales tax, but that tax goes to the residents of that individual buy.
Sorry to interrupt. If you wouldn't mind rephrasing the question so that the folks on the webinar can hear.
So the question is, when you buy a car, does the sales tax go to where the buyer lives? No, but the tax rate is collected based upon the buyer's address. So that dealership will collect any voter-approved sales tax overrides, but the general fund Bradley Burns tax goes to the jurisdiction who hosts the the auto dealer.
Okay, so we, in reality, do not make any money off the car sales that happen out of our jurisdiction.
Unless you had a sales tax override, a transactions and use tax. But you get the Bradley Burns 1% for any car dealership in your jurisdiction.
Did you, are you looking, or do you think what the impact is that the new cannabis industry will be on the state?
That's a whole new consulting business that we're in. The million-dollar question really is, what's the demand going to be? Nobody knows what the real demand is going to be. And there are a lot of ideas out there of growing, manufacturing, retail. The average medical dispensary is ranging between 4 million and 10 million of gross receipts per location. So that's $40,000 to $100,000 in local sales tax.
But isn't the big hang-up, you can't put it in the bank?
Yep.
Isn't that the problem?
Yep.
Until they solve that problem.
That one's probably going to be easier to solve. Hawaii just launched a program to make it a no-cash business, that you have to use a PayPal type of setup to buy at a dispensary. The biggest problem is just it's illegal federally. So there's still some risk, and there's a lot of investment going into a very risky venture. The federal government could come in and raid any of those operations at any time. Not saying they will, it's just that that's the risk. If that goes away, it could become the next wine industry, like in Sonoma, Napa, and the foothills. I wouldn't balance a budget on it until there's more evidence of what demand's going to be. And it's a 15% state excise tax plus the 7.25 cent sales tax. Cities are putting on a gross receipts tax on top of that. At some point, there's a tipping point between buying legally and buying from the black market. But you're encouraged to set up regulations. Even if you want to ban it, you still have to have some regulations in place. Or Kirkland at a 5-gallon bucket of Kirkland brand at Costco.
There's always a law of diminishing returns on anything. So you can't put all your eggs in one basket. But I was opining to a former law enforcement officer. Said, in the last 25, 30 years, you see a decline in the demand, and these folks were risking arrest and all sorts of other things, and the demand was growing. Now think about that a moment. We're going to legalize, it's been legalized, we're going to well-regulate it. What do you think is going to happen to that demand for some time to come? It's certainly not going to drop off. It's going to stay the same or increase.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just logic. You can look at if that's been happening for 25 years, we're not going to see a substantial change anytime soon. Now, yes, you can exhaust the market. You're going to get a law of diminishing returns. Slowly, you will get less and less. Slowly, you'll have less people lining up to be taxed heavily and regulated so tightly.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, there's a very long line of people waiting to have that happen. And, it's an opportunity for all of us. Again, whether you're trying to balance a budget on it or not, it's still a revenue stream. And if it's not going to be a revenue stream for Andy, it's going to be a revenue stream for Bob or Johnny or Betty. That's just simply the way it's going to be.
Well, wait till the puzzle palace over there gets regulating.
I
have problems.
That's not my argument. We're talking about demand and whether that's going to drop off. And I think I'm adequately holding up my end. Can we look at slide 10, please?
That one?
Yes. I'm hoping someone with your background who's wiser than myself can explain to me why those two, being Houston and Los Angeles, and those I assume are chronological, those data points are almost an exact mirror. Can you give me an understanding of why that might be?
That was the Great Recession on the left, and you can see that Houston didn't even contract during the recession because they have a broader base. Right? They weren't.
You can argue that as Los Angeles dipped, Houston grew.
Yeah.
Why would that be?
Because they have a broader base. So Los Angeles dipped because 25% of their sales tax comes from auto sales. People stopped buying cars. Another 12% comes from construction. People stopped remodeling their house. The one thing that we didn't see contract very much in the Great Recession was restaurants. People still went out to eat.
The luxury that you can afford.
Everything else across the board, you held off buying a new suit. You held off, but remember, it was scary. It was just scary. We do a chart that shows employment and sales tax per capita. Employment in most jurisdictions barely fell, but the sales tax plummeted, and it was that fear factor. But they're doing better just because it's a broader base, right? It's just a broader stance. If you stand close together and somebody pushes you, you put your feet together, you fall. Your feet are spread out on a broader base, you're more stable. Same thing with the sales tax base.
I agree. I just find it very interesting that in each area that you see, timeline, and there's goes across, any time that you see Houston succeeding, you see Los Angeles failing. I mean,
oh, you know what? Oh,
they don't line up.
Oh, you know what it is? There's a little bit of seasonality in ours. So because we're more retail oriented, the fourth quarter, the holiday season, so that dip is probably the first quarter, and then.
But again, I think it speaks to what you were saying about the broad base.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at it, basically, it's like a fighter.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a broader base, you can absorb more punches.
Yeah. This one's even more.
You're not going to take the chin,
yeah.
You can hit the mat.
Yeah. That one's even more telling.
Exactly.
Okay, one more comment on the cannabis. So we're tracking a lot of stuff. There are so many proposals on cultivation. I don't think the demand is going to drop. I agree it's going to go up, but the supply, I think, is also going to go up. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Supply is going to change.
Yeah.
Not go up.
Well, there's a 1 million square foot former prison that's going to be converted into a grow operation.
Newsflash, there's been, several countries in South America converted into grows. And now they're going to be a lot less successful in their export business, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you're talking about here. You're talking about an agricultural commodity. And, for the longest time we said, it's not happening, we don't see it, we're going to fight it. And they kicked our tails with it. And all the revenue that we could have gotten from selling the equipment, from the farmers farming it, from the employees, from the tax regulations, the whole 9 yards. Not to mention all the money we spent trying to interdict. And every year we spend more, and every year more comes across the border. That's the definition of losing. So much so that when California went way out, and then Colorado jumped in behind, and Washington, Oregon, that's when the cartels had to send people across the border to grow in the national forest and to try to use our own resources because they could no longer sustain the losses they were taking at the border. They were losing too much in capital. And so as we regulate and we legalize and we push this, we're going to choke the life out of them if we do it right. And I got to think that's the goal. Is take it from Al Capone and put it in the hands of Anheuser-Busch. That really is what it boils down to. The day before Prohibition, Anheuser-Busch was the leading distributor of alcohol in America. The very day after Prohibition, Al Capone replaced it. And then the day after it was repealed, Anheuser-Busch back in charge. It really does boil down to who we want running the industry. The industry has been there forever and it's not going away. What are we going to do? Are we going to recognize that and have some control and regulate it and incentivize the behavior we want? Or not? We haven't been for some time. I would argue we haven't been very successful.
I think they changed their product and they've gone to heroin and meth because they can't make money on marijuana anymore.
Well, and most of the heroin is obviously imported, but the meth is local product. And, that's the one that you have so much danger because of the labs and everything else involved. That, again, allows us to focus law enforcement resources on those types of issues where, quite frankly, as bad as it might be that the guy 5 acres from you has 100 plants and you don't like the smell of it, that's not the same as the guy next door to you has a meth lab in his garage that blows up and kills you and your family.
We do have one question online, if you don't mind. You were talking about legislation in the works to perhaps, or potentially one day, to lower the rates, broaden the base, and the question is what's the likelihood of that sort of reform actually taking place?
The conversation started 4 or 5 years ago and got serious, and that's the first step. Both sides of the aisle are talking about it. How we get there, I think we're a ways off. I think it's several more years away. Senator Hertzberg introduced a bill, but again, didn't lower the rate. It just broadened the base. And in the law, in his proposal, it would apply a modest sales tax to services, which was 3.75, which was equal to the state's general fund amount. That's not good policy.
So what could people in this room do to move that forward or help with that?
Well, if it's a funding thing, and if you want a revenue neutral solution, and you have a broader base, and you have more stability in your revenue to fund vital services, then just outreach to your state legislatures and tell them that you would be in support of a reform measure that fixed our 1933 tax code.
Question, if I might. I don't think there's any doubt that we see that the internet sales tax is growing at a prodigious pace. Certainly, by comparison to everything else, it's really growing. Most of us are here because we want to figure out how we can better access that for our communities, for our citizens, so that we can provide more services. So, in specificity, the goods that are purchased online have to be shipped from our jurisdiction to receive sales tax revenue. Is that accurate?
To get the point of sale, yes, it needs to be shipped, or the sale needs to occur in your jurisdiction.
So the sale, so the distribution center, the item would have to be shipped from our vicinity to
the order needs to be taken from your vicinity.
So the order is taken in Live Oak, but shipped from Walla Walla. Live Oak gets the sales tax.
Only if that business in Walla Walla has physical presence in California.
Okay, so.
And in that example, that is most likely no tax is being collected by the Walla Walla business.
So the 2 points in which we can acquire the sales tax to the internet-based business are both as a distribution center at the location from which the item is actually shipped, and or the location from which the item is actually ordered or purchased, the base of that business. Are those mutually exclusive?
They're mutually exclusive.
So please explain the details.
So,
I haven't understood it.
So the ideal solution of those two federal bills, right? If Congress can change the law to allow states to collect sales tax.
Right now, though. Explain right now, not what we want to have happen. What is on the ground and what we can do with what there is.
Okay, there's no one answer, right? It's based upon the business model. Amazon does not own the stock of goods in California, right? They have all these 28 million square foot warehouses all over the state. They don't own the stock of goods. So title doesn't transfer in California, it transfers in Washington, where the order is being taken on their servers in their headquarters. So that, look, it was written in 1933. We didn't anticipate this. So there's this rule that was established by the State Board of Equalization called flash title. So when you order something that's fulfilled from that warehouse, let's say Tracy, California, there's a big warehouse there. Tracy doesn't get the sales tax. All the sales tax is going to the countywide pools because the Board of Equalization has determined it to be a use tax. An all-use tax, it's an out-of-state transaction because it's transactions occurring at Amazon headquarters.
If I might go about this, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So just for those of us who are slow on the uptake, let's say I want to increase sales tax revenue via internet business in my jurisdiction. What actions can I take to directly affect that?
You need the order desk and the distribution.
I need both. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, that's a tall order, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. And you need, there's a reason Amazon is locating in Riverside County and San Bernardino County and Tracy, right? They've got access to distribution, they've got access to rail, and they got cheap dirt. You're not building a 1 million square foot warehouse in Dana Point, Orange County. It's never going to happen.
Good. And I think that's accurate. I think that's one of the reasons why most of the people sitting at this table no longer here were here, because it makes sense in that most of our jurisdictions are not going to become Sacramento. They're not even going to become Rockland. But to have distribution centers and even the order desks, that type of thing, a network in this region not only helps us get the goods that we already have to market in a different and more profitable manner, but it brings in jobs and sales tax revenue that none of us are seeing. So I think, we got off on this tangent of cannabis, which is not what this was about. I don't mean that negatively towards you, the question was asked. But, this was really to be a more in-depth version of the surface level that we've got in the board meeting. And I'd like to see a plan. How do we get from where we are now to where we all are talking about where we want to be? I'm not putting that on staff. That's on all of us. But let's create the framework. Let's create a roadmap to success instead of complaining about the things that aren't suiting us right now.
There's a
Let's go do something about it.
There's a multi-step solution, right? We got to get the Congress to act to level the playing field to require all internet retailers to collect sales tax. The second step is to say, where is the point of sale? So in 1933, the point of sale was the cash register on Main Street. Now the point of sale could be where I'm on my couch tonight and I pull my smartphone out and I order a pair of socks on Amazon. There's the cash register on my couch. So why not make the allocation of internet retail sales go to the destination of the buyer?
I agree wholeheartedly that we benefit from that kind of change. What I'm asking for is us to recognize that none of us in this room have a vote in that arena, and that we can write a letter and we can talk to our congressman. But let's talk about the things that we can do right now with the way the playing field is to start moving towards success that will only be augmented when we get the legislative changes that we want. Is that fact? Am I alone in that hope?
Well, it's governed by state law, so I
realize that, but we can. What I'm saying, and trying to go real slow, we can take the existing laws and where we are and where we want to be, and still draw a roadmap for how to grow in that direction, almost as if it's happening in a vacuum. And then as the other things change to benefit us, our roadmap only gets more clear and faster achieved.
Director Banks, I'm understanding you. I think I'm going to try to
please, by all
means,
means,
in a different way. You're saying, could we, as a region, come up with an economic development strategy that allows us to grow businesses, right? Grow the point of sale, the counter, grow the distribution within our region so that we can, within the current regulatory environment that we can control, that we can try to start capturing some of that and then begin to also align ourselves to what federal and state solutions may be coming down.
I could not agree more.
Well, I'm just repeating.
That's exactly my intent.
Got it. And that's very much in the vein of the economic prosperity theme that you have been talking about as a board. So I think that your staff here, I think we hear that, and we will be trying to figure out how we can, through this process, through working with GSAC and the Metro Chamber and Valley Vision, to kind of help to give you the board the platform or the process to be able to start working on that.
I think it's fantastic because, especially with the diversity of the municipalities and counties represented within SACOG, it's a perfect partnership for these things, and maybe, long term would work out that network by which, there's a call center in Live Oak and there's a distribution center in Yuba City and et cetera, and we're finding ways to share in each other's success and build on each other's success. That's my goal. Not to push Director Buckland out, but for he and I to help our both citizen groups advance and all those around.
So, not so much, I guess, a question, but more of a statement. The concept of taxing services, I think, is wholly, it's a solution to a tax revenue issue that yet could also penalize, without having clear definition of what services are. Could certainly penalize jurisdictions where there's capital investment being made in communities that may exceed, millions of dollars, in which they're already capturing use taxes and other things for the goods to supply the services that are attached to those businesses, where you may see in some of those businesses now then moving away from that into even virtual components and not no longer they're going to shy away from the services part to some extent, and when you talk about an accountant taxing an accountant, first thing I'd do as an accountant is move to Nevada, and I'd have an online presence to my customers in California. I'm taxing. So those are the kinds of things that I think we have to be cognizant of. Those changes can happen to the other industries that are out there that would be defined as service, and how those regulate. Right. So I would caution us to think about when we see it as an easy grab, that we have to be very, very careful in how we would structure and define what services are and how they're connected to the state.
It's certainly a dynamic estimate that would need to be done.
Yeah.
And you talk about technological advancements. I mean, 3D printing.
Right.
Be able to print our own shirts. Go and print your own suit. Maybe we're 5-10 years from that. But you'll have some decisions to make about this vacant retail space that's coming. We've only seen the beginning of vacancies. That's going to have to be repositioned for housing.
The shift is into services.
Yeah.
It's something else. It's going to be a tangible service that can't be done in a virtual space. It's going to have to be done in person. But yet, if you want to fill those spaces, we'd have to be real careful on what the taxing those type of entities would be.
I just want to say that I agree completely with everything Director Buckland has just said. And if you don't mind, I believe the graph just illustrates this point. We see, why was Houston more successful and Los Angeles suffering? They had that broader base. We don't want to do anything to narrow our stance. Not a good choice in a fight. And we're in a street fight. And so, I think Director Buckland is exceptionally wise to look at, yes, we want to gather more tax revenue, and I think the internet tax revenue is probably the lowest hanging fruit in a lot of ways. It's going to take some work on our part and some recruiting and some effort, but it's there and it exists. The law doesn't have to be redefined to acquire it. And you don't take great risk in leveraging businesses out of your area, your jurisdiction, or even your state by doing so, because that's already where we are. So there's very little risk and a lot of reward. It just takes some work to get there.
Okay. All right. I think that wraps it up. We don't have any more questions. With that, thank you so much, Doug Jensen, for spending your brief lunch hour with us, working again. We're going to say goodbye to everybody online. Thank you for your time. And this, again, was recorded, and we will send it up to all registrants. Have a great day.
Thank you, Doug.
Doug, I feel like we just gave you the worst